I inherited an old house I barely remembered. Quiet road, cracked driveway, nothing special. Until an HOA Karen parked her car across my driveway and told me I wasn't allowed to use it. She waved HOA rules in my face. She threatened fines. She said, "I'll have you removed." So I did something she never expected. I pulled out my badge. Because the man she was blocking was the county sheriff. And 5 minutes later, her car was being towed, while the entire neighborhood watched in silence. I didn't expect trouble from the inheritance. The house was old, quiet, sitting at the edge of a narrow road in a mountain subdivision. My aunt had lived there for decades without issues, and when she passed, the place came to me. I planned to clean it up, stay a few weeks, then decide what to do next. The first morning, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee and froze. A silver SUV was parked sideways across my driveway, blocking it completely. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe a delivery driver. Maybe a neighbor who didn't know anyone lived there yet. I waited. 10 minutes passed. No one came. Then I noticed the laminated notice taped to my garage door. Unauthorized use of HOA managed driveway. Subject to fines. That's when I knew this wasn't accidental. I walked down the road and found a woman inspecting a flower bed like she owned the place. She wore a reflective HOA vest and had a clipboard tucked under her arm. When I asked if the SUV was hers, she didn't even look surprised. "Yes," she said. "And you're not supposed to be parking here." I told her it was my driveway. She smiled the kind of smile people use when they think they've already won. "This driveway is maintained by the HOA," she said, "which means it's under HOA control. You'll need approval to use it." I asked her where she got that information. She tapped her clipboard and said, "No map. No document. Just attitude." When I tried to step past her, she blocked me and warned me about daily fines for non-compliance. She even threatened to have my car towed if I attempted to use the driveway again. That's when I realized something important. She didn't know who I was, and I wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. Instead, I asked for her name. She proudly introduced herself as the HOA president and said she'd handled situations like this before. According to her, my aunt had been allowed to use the driveway as a courtesy, but that courtesy ended with her death. That made no sense. After she walked off, I pulled the property file from my bag. I always travel with copies, habit from my job. The survey clearly showed the driveway entirely on the parcel I'd inherited. No easement, no shared access, no OA rights. Still, I wanted to be careful. I drove to the county office and pulled archived plats. Same result. The driveway had never been HOA property. Not even close. By the time I returned, the SUV was still there. I knocked on the HOA office door and asked, calmly, for documentation proving their claim. The president appeared again, now less polite. She told me paperwork would take weeks, and that until then, the driveway was restricted. I warned her one last time. She laughed and said, "You can't do anything." That night, I parked on the street and watched as she added another notice to my door. This one threatening fines starting the next morning. That was the moment I stopped being patient. Because the next step wasn't an HOA issue anymore. It was a property obstruction. And the person blocking my driveway had no idea she'd just challenged the one authority that didn't answer to HOA rules. The next morning, I woke up early. The SUV was still there, parked even tighter against my driveway, like a challenge. Another notice had been added to my door, this one stamped, Final Warranty. I didn't tear it down. I took photos, then I made one phone call. I didn't call the HOA. I didn't call a lawyer. I called dispatch. I reported an illegally parked vehicle obstructing private property access. I gave the address. I gave the plate number. And I waited. 10 minutes later, a patrol unit pulled up. The officer stepped out, looked at the driveway, then at the SUV, and raised an eyebrow. He asked if I wanted to file a formal obstruction report. I said yes. That's when the HOA president stormed out of her office, furious. She started shouting about HOA authority, noise rules, community bylaws, every word louder than the last. She pointed at the officer and demanded he stand down. He didn't. Instead, he asked her for proof that the driveway belonged to the HOA. She had none. She tried to argue that HOA maintenance meant ownership. The officer shook his head. Maintenance contracts didn't override deeds. He radioed for a tow. That's when she lost it. She screamed that I was abusing power. She accused me of intimidation. She threatened to go public. I finally spoke, calmly. I introduced myself by name and title. The change was immediate. Her voice dropped. Her face went pale. She stammered something about a misunderstanding and tried to move the SUV herself. Too late. The tow truck arrived. Neighbors gathered. Phones came out. The entire street watched as the SUV was lifted and driven away. The officer issued a citation for obstruction and trespass. Silence followed. The HOA president didn't say another word. Later that afternoon, I received an email from the HOA's legal counsel requesting a meeting. The tone was completely different. Apologetic, careful, formal. At the meeting, they admitted the truth. They'd assumed the driveway belonged to the HOA because my aunt never challenged them. They never checked the records. They never expected anyone to push back. They agreed to withdraw all notices, issue a written apology, and update HOA maps to reflect the correct boundaries. The president was removed from enforcement duties pending review. I didn't press further. I didn't need to. Word spread fast. The HOA stopped making drive-by claims. People started checking their deeds. Questions were asked. Authority shifted. The driveway stayed clear after that. Sometimes when I walk out in the morning, I still see faint tire marks near the edge, where the SUV used to sit. It reminds me of something important. Power isn't about who yells the loudest or waves the biggest rulebook. It's about knowing your rights and being willing to stand your ground, especially when the person blocking your way thinks you'll never push back.